Welcome back, everybody. This is the NTC team. You're listening to the NTC podcast. This is Aaron Washington. I'm joined by Ali, Shafiq, and Aram here. We are three members of the No Trade Clause team. We kind of head up the project here of getting No Trade Clause off the ground, promoting the project, running the website, and just being sure that you guys have everything you're looking for when it comes to NBA resources. So this time around, we are focusing on the trade deadline. That's been about 1 week now since all that action went underway, as well as the buyout market. There are three players, prominent players that were bought out over the past week. And we want to take a look at how their buyouts are going to impact their former teams and their current teams when it comes to their salary cap situations, their on-court rotations, and things of that nature. So, guys, this trade deadline was really crazy, and it kind of shook us a little bit because in the days leading up to it, there were very little moves made. It was very quiet. It looked like it was going to be just a run-of-the-mill trade deadline with a few trades made, but it ended up being the opposite, actually. There were 16 trades made. 23 teams were involved in these trades, and there were 46 roster players moved, according to a tweet that Woj dropped a few days ago. So that's actually the most in each of those categories in the past 35 years, according to him, on trade deadline day. So that's really just an insane thing to think about when it comes to like the action of the trade deadline. So we're actually looking at historic deadline compared to, people were saying it was going to be quiet, and that didn't end up being the case. So it was a little bit of a pump fake when you think about it, but it really was wild. And also 15 draft picks were exchanged. So any way you slice it, this is really active. But I think we have a little more information. I know, Ram, you've been doing some digging, and you've found some of the situations as to just kind of like a general overview of how this went. So do you have any insights to share with us and anything you found pertaining to the trade deadline?
Yeah, definitely. So as you said, record trade deadline in terms of number of trades and then teams involved, players involved. So it was a crazy deadline overall, as you said as well. All of it was kind of cramped into like that one final day instead of over the last couple of days, which made our work a bit tougher here to try to analyze the trades and stuff all within 24 hours kind of thing. But yeah, digging deep into the numbers, I just took down a few notes. So I think you mentioned 23 teams participating in trades overall. There are actually like 28 teams total, like if you include buyouts and signings, waiver wire signing and buyouts. So like only two teams really didn't get any roster movement at all. And those two teams were, by my records, Minnesota Timberwolves and the Phoenix Suns. And then in terms of those teams that kind of made moves around the edges, Memphis bought out Gorgie Jang. They didn't do any other moves other than that. Brooklyn signed LaMarcus Aldridge. They didn't do other moves. The Lakers signed Andre Drummond. The Milwaukee Bucks made a trade a few days before the trade deadline. And then also in talks to acquire either Jeff Teague or Austin Rivers or both. So we'll see what happens with that. And then Indiana, I think, made one. They cut one guy. So that's really not a roster move at all, but Jalen LeCue.
Yep.
But yeah, so only two teams that didn't make any moves at all, the Minnesota Timberwolves and Phoenix Suns, which is crazy if you think about it. So going off like luxury tax stuff, what I found really interesting was zero teams didn't change their luxury tax standing. So like if they were in the tax, they didn't move out of the tax. If they were out of the tax, they didn't move in the tax. So nobody moved in terms of that. And so there were 6 teams that were due to pay the tax, and then those 6 teams will in fact pay the tax at the end of the year if everything stays as is with buyouts and stuff like that. Go ahead.
I was shocked. Quick little point that Utah was a team that we were all seeing, if they would shed some salary, and they were only $2 million above the tax. So I thought they'd make a quick little move, and it was feasible, but they just didn't. And I mean, that's a credit to I guess that they have new ownership there, and the ownership there is probably ready to pay the tax. The Jazz organization, they've never been really tax friendly, so it is what it is. So.
And this is probably the best the team has been in quite a while. I think that also plays a part in it. When you're looking at the best record in the league, best record in the Western Conference, they're on a roll. I think they're really wary of kind of maintaining the chemistry they have going with this team. So even though, they're going to incur a small tax penalty at the end of the season if things don't change, I think that's partly because they're so competitive, and it may even have surpassed their expectations going into the season, just how good they are. So I think that's something else to keep in mind when we're kind of just trying to figure out exactly why they made moves or moves they did not make in the trade deadline.
Correct.
But
Yep,
Elite,
absolutely true.
did you have any insights from this? I know you kind of talked about you were a little bit surprised by Utah's situation. Anything else stand out to you as far as what teams were active or what teams weren't active, things like that?
I thought Phoenix would have made some moves around the margins. Maybe looked at the backup point guard market, looked at someone like Jeff Teague possibly. But that was one team that did stand out to me that didn't make a move because I do feel like where they are in the standings, where they are going to be heading in the playoffs, they're a serious team. They should be taken seriously. With the leap of faith that they took with Chris Paul, obviously those dividends are being paid. But I just felt like a franchise that went all in to go get Chris Paul would have maybe saw some potential trade candidates and taken a leap of faith there too, considering the Lakers are currently AD and LeBron are hurt, and we don't really know what it's going to look like. Obviously, they've won the ring, and they're going to be the favorites going into the playoffs. But I do feel like with the amount of movement that we saw, I would say that the market, that the fact that the Lakers don't look as strong as they did or were did make was a point in the decision-making process of a lot of front offices.
Yeah. Definitely agree with that, Ali. The Lakers situation is, particularly interesting because they have some guys coming up that, are potentially they're eligible for an extension. Schroeder was the guy we've heard about in discussions just recently. So definitely some things going on with that team that I think we should keep an eye on because they're trying to remain competitive. But then eventually you're going to end up having to compete with or rather deal with the tax situation and things like that. So we're going to get into that a little bit also. But what I wanted to do with you guys here is look at the most impactful deals in terms of just the caliber of players that were exchanged. So, the deals that I really wanted to focus on with you guys were the Aaron Gordon trade going to Denver, the Heat acquiring Oladipo, the Celtics adding Fournier, and then the Bulls acquiring Vucevic. So, obviously there are a ton of deals we can discuss, but when it comes to our time constraints here, we have to focus on a few of these deals just to kind of make sure we don't go, too far over our time here. But, this is a good time where, outlets do this all the time. The Ringer does it, some other outlets out there, but they do winners and losers. So I feel like it's a good way where we can kind of divvy up which teams really made some great moves in this trade deadline and maybe some other teams that left a little bit on the board or could have done a little bit more with the resources they had and some of the needs they had. So, we can start that first deal with Aaron Gordon going to Denver and also maybe look at some of the cap implications as well. Of course, you have Gary Harris and RJ Hampton and a first-round pick going to the Magic, and then the Nuggets getting back Aaron Gordon and Gary Clark. So for me, that is definitely a win for this franchise. Denver, they're trying to make a step up in the standings. They're trying to solidify their status as title contenders. And you're giving up a guy like Gary Harris, which he's not been a factor for Denver for a while, and he's owed $19 million. So shedding that salary for a guy that's so injury prone is definitely a plus. And then you're getting a guy like Aaron Gordon who is making 18 this season, and then he has a descending contract going to 16 next year. So I feel like that was really good value for a guy that's in his prime, and he feels a key need. So I'm sure that everybody has it as a win, but what are you guys feeling about that in terms of how Denver made out in that deal? Maybe even Orlando, if you wanted to go into that a little bit.
So yeah, as you said, I think Denver Nuggets are the winners here, but that doesn't mean that Orlando Magic didn't win this deal too. I think they can both come out winners out of this. Aaron Gordon's descending contract is really good for them. They actually clear up cap space for next season as well, because Gary Harris is at $20.5 million next year, whereas Aaron Gordon will be at $16.4. Right. So that's great for Denver, clearing up a bit more space under the luxury tax line. And in terms of just basketball stuff, Aaron Gordon's I think going to be a perfect fit around Jokic with his ability to cut, to move the ball around as well. I think he'll fit in real well in that Nuggets offense. What about you, Ali?
Man, so I've always wanted to see Aaron Gordon play with an elite playmaker. And look, I went to the University of Arizona, so I've seen Aaron Gordon play my freshman year of college, and I was a big fan, man. A lot of people used to say he was like this Blake Griffin type, and I never really understood that. I guess people were just really mesmerized by the athleticism. But what I really saw was a Sean Marion type Swiss Army knife guy who could really do a lot of different things on the court. He may not excel at everything, but he's really good at a bunch of stuff. And I feel like his fit next to Jokic is going to be amazing. He's going to be running along that baseline. He's going to be cutting. He's going to be moving. He's going to get spot up attempts. He's going to be creating 4-on-3 opportunities off that pick and roll. I mean, in the couple, I think he's only played. I think they've only played one game so far. And in that one game, I mean, they're running 5-on-4 pick and rolls, Aaron Gordon setting screens for Jokic and, and he's making plays out of there. So I'm super excited about the fit. Cap wise, I think they did really well to get to get that descending contract. And unfortunately, Gary Harris not being a part of that team kind of sucks because, I root for Gary Harris, and, he had a great playoff series because they really needed his defense when they came back in that first round series.
True.
So it's definitely going to be great. I think the fit between him and Porter is going to be awesome because, they've been playing a lot of Porter at the 4, and, they did this last year with Jeremy Grant. So where they still get the effects of playing Porter at the 4, but they're playing a bigger wing so they could defend, the LeBron types, the big wing types, Kawhi and things of that nature. So I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be awesome fit, and I'm super excited. And also, Michael Porter Jr. is, I believe, extension eligible this summer. Correct?
Believe so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So pretty much, I mean, this is going to be their team moving forward. They've made their decision. They've traded a couple first-round picks, and I think with the Magic, I think the Magic did well in terms of their return. I think that's probably the best return that they probably were getting on the market, especially for a team that is trying to contend, trying to really solidify their spot in the Western Conference. So great for both sides.
Yeah. Absolutely. For the Magic, they're going through a transition period. So really what they wanted to do is get some, a couple players. I mean, they got, a veteran that can come in, and Gary Harris and provide some stability when he gets healthy. RJ Hampton is definitely a young prospect that has a high ceiling. And then with that 2025 first round pick, that's something to keep an eye on as well. In the next few years, we're going to be seeing prospects go directly from high school to the NBA. So, if they find somebody has a no-brainer talent and that's going to be in the draft, that's something to keep an eye on as well going down the road. So those future drafts are going to be exciting, guys, with those prospects coming out earlier, and that's going to change the foundation of the draft a little bit. So the Magic are going to have a long road ahead of them in terms of a rebuild, but if they play their cards right, they're going to be in great shape for sure. When it comes to the Oladipo deal, some people might see this as the ultimate win of the deadline. I'm one of those people, honestly. It's right up there with the Denver deal. And I keep thinking about what it took for Miami to get this guy away from the Rockets. Olynyk, Bradley, in a draft swap is a very minuscule price to pay for the potential upside of Oladipo. So for the Heat, they're going to have to contend with Oladipo's impending new deal. That's going to be certainly above $20 million. It could even be in the mid to high 20s per year, depending on how he performs the rest of the season. But when it comes down to what Miami's trying to do, which is compete and really be a championship team, if Oladipo looks as good as he has the potential to be, I think acquiring that kind of salary is going to be worth it. Miami is going to have no problem paying the tax if they really believe that's a winning team. Avery Bradley wasn't playing. The draft swap is probably going to be inconsequential. And then Olynyk is a guy that was going to be in free agency anyway pretty soon. So I think with all things added up, with Oladipo, the potential that he has, and then the players that were distributed to get him, I think Miami did an incredible job. And somehow Miami, that ownership keeps finding ways to exchange bad contracts for good ones. So all those 20, I believe it was like the summer of 16, all those deals are gone off the books. And then they find themselves with, 2 or 3 really high impact players. Bam Oladipo and Jimmy Butler. So great deal for both sides. Ali, I'm sorry you guys got fleeced a little bit. They definitely made out better than you did in our mock trade deadline, where you actually acquired Tyler Hero, but it looks like the Heat weren't willing to give him up. So this is what the Rockets had to deal with. But
yeah, go ahead, Aram.
No, you first. You're the.
You gotta give your grade on this. How they do.
So. I mean, I like the trade for Miami, taking a pick or taking a chance on Victor Oladipo. I think the biggest thing for me is he's moving into a culture and an environment where he's going to not only keep himself in check, but there's going to be others keeping him in check. And I think being in that hungry environment where is going to really bring out, at least I hope, a revived version of Oladipo who isn't going to be asked to do a lot. I mean, I don't expect the Miami Heat to ask him to be back to his all NBA. I mean, obviously that would be great. And that's what they're shooting for, right? That's kind of what they traded for. But I don't think that they are going to throw those expectations on him. I think they're going to, work him into the rotation. I'm sure there's going to probably be some, maybe some slight growing pains as to, figuring out where you're going to, be positioned on the court and things of that nature and getting acclimated into the sets that the Miami Heat run. But I love it for both sides, or excuse me. I think for Oladipo, I would say, or for the Rockets, I should say, getting back, I get it from what Houston was thinking that, okay, and I think a lot of it is fueled by ownership. Obviously we know how Tillman Fertitta operates. So with that being said, I think the message from ownership was that, hey, we're going to shed salary. We're going to try to get assets in return. But really, frankly, I think the asset in return was cap space and freeing up their books. So I get it, but I also don't think that they, got enough for Victor Oladipo. So.
Yeah, this one's a head scratcher, I think, from Houston's part, because, I mean, maybe this shows just like what the other deals they're getting, that it was not much they were getting from other teams as well. So they kind of took the best deal on the table, but I don't really get it from their aspect, because I think they traded expiring deal in Oladipo for other expiring deals. So in that sense, like they didn't gain a long-term asset or anything like that. And then, Aaron, you mentioned the first-round pick swap next year is likely not to come out to anything. So really kind of like a head-scratcher in terms of what Houston's trying to do. Maybe Houston is like trying to stealth tank because like Oladipo might have provided some value for them, and then they would maybe be in some trouble if they sat him with no good reason, like the Oklahoma City Thunder are doing with Al Horford. So maybe that's the reason. Like I see that as like the biggest positive on their end. And then Miami, as you said, Aaron, great upside in Oladipo, worth a flyer. You didn't lose much in Olynyk and Avery Bradley. I know you're a Heat fan, so you definitely have a better mind as to what Olynyk and Avery Bradley were providing, but I don't think they were providing much value, and I think Oladipo can definitely make up for that. And then you guys also acquired Bielitsa and Trevor Ariza, so they can kind of make up for the loss of Olynyk in the front court.
Exactly. So I think what is shown in this transaction is that, Lee, you touched on this, the ownership shows its colors from both sides. For Houston, they prioritize. I think they were just scared of what Oladipo was going to command at free agency. And, of course, they prioritize the youth movement. So they wanted to just acquire some salary fillers, some guys that are definitely going to be free agents, but they didn't want to lose Oladipo for nothing. But ironically enough, it's almost like they got nothing anyway, because Bradley and Olynyk might not be there. I mean, Olynyk might not be there. He's going to be unrestricted. And then you look at like Avery Bradley and he might not even be there with a team option. And then the pick swap is whatever. So it's like you didn't get nothing, but you were pretty close anyway. So it's just weird how that worked out. And then, with Bielitsa being an expiring contract, that's definitely nice. And he can help in the interim being here with this team. And, going from there, it's going to be interesting to see, Ariza also expiring. So, I think Miami did quite well. And Houston is going to, they have some things to work out because they're obviously trying to tear this thing down a little bit and kind of rebuild it in a sense. But you still have John Wall, which is, probably one of the worst contracts in the league. That's something that we're going to discuss in a future podcast. But, looking at over 120 million owed over the next 3 years is definitely a tough pill to swallow. So tough sledding for Houston ownership in the coaching, but that's where you show your colors. That's where you kind of start to have to be creative and find your way out of that hole. For the next deal, guys, I mean, we're looking at Fournier going to the Celtics, and I think this is another win from the Celtics perspective. You're getting a scorer, you're getting a guy that you could bring in as a sixth man and be an excellent fit in that capacity, give you about 15 a game maybe, pretty efficient. And then Orlando getting back some more picks, 2025 and 2027 second round picks. I think this is a pretty decent return. I'm sure they wanted more, but for Fournier being a guy that's going to be a free agent and not one of the marquee players, you definitely have to kind of pick your poison there and get what you can get, because they're definitely going in the same direction as Houston. So Fournier's deal, you added to the Celtics, not terrible. They're going to have to find a way to re-sign him, but the Celtics obviously have championship aspirations, and that's what kind of separates them from other teams. And I don't think they're afraid to pay big money if they really believe the team is going to be competitive. So I see that as the one from the Celtics, and it is what it is from the Magic's perspective. But curious to see what you guys think about this, because the Celtics definitely needed some reinforcements on the court, and I think they got that in Fournier. So they definitely addressed a key need, and I think they get bonus points for accomplishing that.
Look, getting 2 second-round picks for Evan Fournier, when you kind of think about it, is pretty crazy, because I think Evan Fournier is pretty good, but I do understand why that might have happened. He's an unrestricted free agent going into the summer. So with that being said, if the value was so low with Evan Fournier, considering his on-ball and off-ball skills, he's a solid defender. He isn't great. He's solid. He does his job. Why weren't there more teams looking to add him? I feel like a team like the Lakers could have added him. If the value was at 2 second-round picks, they need someone like him. Hit shots off the dribble, get to the rim, off the ball. He provides some playmaking, some solid defense. They've been kind of missing that wing in Los Angeles. So, with that being said, I'm kind of shocked that more teams didn't go after him. But I do like the deal for the Boston Celtics. They were able to bring him into the trade exception. And I think that, they only brought him in to sign. I think they're going to probably sign him for sure. They're going to look forward to signing him. But in terms of starting or coming off the bench, I'm not sure exactly where. He hasn't had a great start. His one game with Boston hasn't been great, but I think he's going to be a great fit wherever he is. So I think with the shooting and playmaking that Boston has, it'll be a great fit. Kemba's starting to come around, so I think it's going to be great. I think it may not be exactly what they're looking for, because I feel like what they were looking for was more north-south, and Evan Fournier is more east-west, but in terms of getting to the rim and where they kind of operate on the court. But with Kemba's reemergence and getting healthy, I think that that missing link will be alleviated.
Yeah, I think valid points over there. I think the tricky thing was, I also agree Evan Fournier is a really good player. So I actually thought he would go for a late first round pick. But as you said, an expiring contract, who can leave at the end of the year, it's tough to give up a first round pick for that. Mm-hmm. So 2 seconds it was from Boston to Orlando. It was a little tougher, I think, for other teams to acquire Evan Fournier other than the Celtics, because as you mentioned, they had that giant trade exception from the Gordon Hayward trade. So that they could easily absorb that and also remain under the luxury tax by doing that move, although they are very close to it right now. Whereas the Lakers didn't have that that benefit of the trade exception or absorbing that amount of salary, because they were kind of right up at the apron. So they would have to give up, I guess, KCP
meaningful
and another contract. So you're kind of replacing KCP with Evan Fournier. So not really adding to the depth, but maybe you add a better player. So that's a tricky one. And then as to what Evan Fournier can provide for Boston, yeah, he's another guy on the wing. They're kind of thin on in terms of their bench rotation on the wing. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, they do their thing, but you need some other guys to contribute from that spot. That's all the thoughts I have on Evan Fournier, I think.
One more thing I wanted to point out: the Celtics are, very close to the luxury tax here. Based on our cap sheets that are current, they're under 1 million away, 653,000. So I think I give bonus points for Boston from getting a player with that exception, spending as much as they could, getting the best player in that price range without going into the tax. So kudos on them. I think they managed their books very well in that transaction, addressing a need, but still, refraining from spending too much. I think that's part of the reason why a bunch of people were like, why don't they get this player and this player with, they have 28 million, but you have to understand that would take them, probably past where they want to go money-wise. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a really good job there. So the last, I think with this deal, this is a little bit tricky. So with the Bulls getting Vucevic from Orlando, on the surface, it's a great deal for Chicago's standpoint. You're getting a great, talented all-star big man, which is something they've lacked for quite a while over there. And then the Magic, I think the Magic clearly got great value out of this. 2 first-round picks, 2 impactful players. Wendell Carter Jr. has, I think, a pretty good ceiling still. I think he's been limited by injuries. But for the Bulls, I'm not so hasty to give them a winning grade on this because, so far they're on a 4-game losing streak. They've lost their first 2 games with Vucevic. And if you're not winning now, I don't think he's going to get better for the next couple of years. His contract is very team-friendly, but I think as he gets in his 30s, you're going to lose some value from that. The whole reason behind getting him was to win games, and it's not really working out quite well so far. I think they compromised their future as well. And it's not like they're a super old team either, ready to win right now. They still have some young guys, Kobe White, Markkanen, guys like that are not quite at their apex yet. So I want to give them like an incomplete / like a neutral for this deal. I won't say they're losers, because Vucevic is quite a player, but I think we have to be wary of the fact that they're assuming all of this talent, but the pressure is on to win now, and I'm not quite sure they're in a position to do that yet.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm glad you brought that up because the question that comes when I first saw that Woj bomb, I was like, what's the direction for the Chicago Bulls? Because that is a trade that you do when you actually have a direction you're headed towards, like whether, it's making the playoffs, and that's what the Bulls are trying to do. They're trying to make the playoffs. They're trying to fortify their spot there in the East. With that being said, does that I don't think this increases their ceiling at all, but this definitely increases their floor. And Vucevic is a great player. I know the Orlando Magic were looking for a Drew Holiday type of return, and while I thought that it was possible to get close to something like that, I don't think that was going to be realistic. And I think in terms of Orlando's return, it's pretty solid return. But we have to understand that he's a big who's not super mobile. He's an incredibly talented big man, incredibly talented scorer. But in terms of the playing at the highest levels of NBA basketball, especially defensively, someone like Drew Holiday is much more valuable than Nikola Vucevic, and that's kind of where that the distinction lies between a potential trade offer. I think offensively, it's going to be really interesting to see how Vucevic fits because they've been starting. I think they started Lauri Markkanen next to Vucevic, and Lauri, he's that 4.5. That we don't really know who's guarding on defense. The thing with him entering restricted free agency, we don't know what position he's supposed to guard, and that's the decision that the Chicago front office is trying to make. But they do have someone like Thad, and I think Thad might be a better fit next to Vooch. But I do like the way that Thad has been playing backup center and even starting at center before the trade. But getting Wendell Carter for Orlando was nice too. I'm a believer in him, and I do think that there's going to be some untapped potential as long as he can stay healthy. I hope he can stay healthy. I really do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good points there. You know what? I think I like it a little more for Chicago than you guys do. Just because Vucevic isn't like an expiring contract or anything. Like you're gonna have him for 2 seasons after this at $24 million and $22 million, which is, anything better than they would get in free agency. I mean, you're having basically Vucevic on a 46 million 2-year deal after this season, so that's like a great free agency signing. But yeah, you give up Wendell Carter, you give up 2 first-round picks, definitely valuable picks and a valuable player, Wendell Carter, as you mentioned. Chicago loses cap space because of Vucevic's long-term contract, but as I said before, like that's better than anything you'd be able to do in free agency. So I think I like it a bit more for Chicago than you guys do, but I do think Orlando did well here as well. Chicago isn't going to get to the level of Brooklyn or Philadelphia or Milwaukee, I think, but I think they're kind of set in stone for at least a play-in tournament, and I think they're going to be a scary team to play in the play-in tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. If they can find their way in there, they're going to be tough to compete with. But yeah, definitely see them as, I guess depending on who you ask, they can be winners or losers. But I think there's no doubt that in the situation they were in, Orlando came out as winners. Looking at a guy like Wendell Carter, he's going to have he's cost controlled on a rookie deal through next season. And then after that, they can reevaluate. If they want to hold off on him and just wait till he hits restricted free agency, they can do that. And then if he is still a little bit hampered by injuries, they can probably get a team-friendly deal and just kind of tiptoe their way forward with him while maintaining some flexibility as they go into the future. So I like that from Orlando's perspective.
Poor Mo Bamba, man.
Mo Bamba's a break, man, because they still have Kim Birch on the roster, Wendell Carter, so it's like he keeps getting buried, and I feel bad for him because I think he has something to prove and something to offer still. So I'm with you. It's definitely a tough sledding. Before we get into the buyouts, I wanted to look at a couple of teams that shed salary and really improved their luxury tax position. The Warriors really did a good job with that. So, or rather, I guess it's really just one team. With the Warriors sent out Brad Wanamaker, and by doing so, they kind of shed some salary with that. I mean, they sent him out. And, of course, we know all about their luxury tax, difficulties. So they're right now, I read this the other day from John Hollinger in his Athletic article, but they're in the $5.25 range when it comes to tax multipliers. So, I mean, good God, like when you think about how much they're paying all their players for the roster, it blows my mind. So they sent out $4 million in salary, by sending out Wanamaker, by sending out Marquise Chris to San Antonio, but they saved $12 million in the process by doing that once you kind of factor in all the luxury tax penalties. So I did want to give a kind of like an honorable mention to Golden State. They weren't as active as those other teams, but they did play a part in reducing their tax hit. And I think the incentive is even greater this season because they're not particularly competitive. They're hovering around 8 to 10 in the seedings out west. And, the ownership doesn't want to pay a hefty amount for a team that's only, in the play-in slots in the West. So definitely kudos for them. And it's tough being a tax team, but at least a team like Brooklyn is winning. Golden State is it's tough sledding, but it comes to the territory now.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
go ahead, Aram.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, as you said, like, I think Brad Wanamaker is making 2.3. So with that, like, 5x multiplier, that's like almost like a 10 million player. Yeah. So it's definitely worth the savings for the Golden State Warriors when you look at their financials.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's been odd. It's been really odd, the fact that he just hasn't been able to contribute consistently. I mean, he was awesome for Boston. So just sad.
It really is. Every dollar counts, but in Golden State situation, every $5. So the next portion, we're going to look at some buyout players. The 3 guys that really made a splash with their buyouts: Gorgie Jang for Memphis, LaMarcus Aldridge getting out of San Antonio, and then Drummond getting to LA, as was kind of foreshadowed for a few days here. But Gorgie Jang is the first guy here on this list. I am sad as a Heat fan that he didn't find his way to Miami, but I can understand somewhat going to San Antonio. They've been very competitive this season. He gave back almost $700,000. So these guys, LaMarcus Aldridge was the exception, but for Drummond and Gorgie Jang, we're looking at about a minimum salary that they gave back, which of course they're going to recuperate in their next deal. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't make too much of a difference. for Memphis. They're still going to have to pay, a decent amount of salary, but Gorgie Dang wasn't in their long-term plans ultimately, so it made sense for them to move on from him. Jaren Jackson, by the way, I'm still not sure when Jaren Jackson is going to be back. It feels like he's been out for ages, but rolling with him, Valanciunas, they're big guys. It makes sense to move on from Gorgie Dang, but he should make a huge difference for San Antonio. And, for San Antonio, they definitely, finesse their way through this whole buyout period because they let LaMarcus go. LaMarcus puts $7 million back on or takes it off their books. They avoid the salary tax, the luxury tax. But ironically enough, Gorgie Dang would have been a perfect, he is a perfect player for them as a replacement. So I do like that for San Antonio. Kind of like an under the radar move that I think is going to make a huge difference for them, for their books and for their rotation. That should be playoff bound if everything goes well for them.
Yeah, Gorgie Dang is a solid backup big who was providing great minutes for the Grizzlies. And I mean, what I'm surprised was him going to San Antonio, because San Antonio has never really looked like a buyout candidate team before, really. I can't remember the last time I'd actually love to look that up, the last time San Antonio signed a buyout guy like that. But yeah, I think he's going to be a great fit. It is pretty funny that he's replacing LaMarcus Aldridge, which we'll talk about next. With that being said, I think he's going to be providing some valuable minutes. And what I really, really like about it from Gorgie's perspective is that he's walking into an environment where not only is he going to get some playing time, some minutes, he's going to play with young guys. He's going to help them develop. He's going to run pick and roll with them. He's going to defend the rim. He's not a great switch guy, but you're not really asking him to switch, So with that being said, he's going to, be an unrestricted free agent this summer. And I think going into an environment like that, we'll get him paid. We saw what Mason Plumlee got, from Detroit. You wouldn't be surprised if, Gorgie gets a nice little offer if he plays well in San Antonio. Yep. So I do like the fit for sure.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. Not one that I expected, like LaMarcus Aldridge and Andre Drummond. He was mentioned in like some rumors and stuff, but not something I expected like for sure to happen. Memphis doesn't lose much. I think they just did him a favor because he wanted to go play for a playoff team or at least a playing tournament team. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think he will contribute to the San Antonio Spurs. He gets a little win too, like financially, because he gave back $700,000, and I think the Spurs are paying him closer to like $1 million, which is above the minimum prorated. So yeah, a little financial win for him too.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be that situation. You get paid from your former team. You go to a team that's still competitive, just as competitive, if not more so than Memphis, and you get a pay bump in the process. So Gorgie's winning across all three levels if you think about it. That dude is doing really well for himself. For LaMarcus Aldridge's perspective, this is pretty interesting. And, he gave back $7 million. So, his dead salary on the books for San Antonio is about $18 million now. So they're paying him to move on. But as I mentioned before, San Antonio avoids the tax from this buyout due to LaMarcus Aldridge doing them a favor in this area. So that's definitely a plus for them. So for LaMarcus, he's moving on to Brooklyn. And there's a lot of discussion on how Brooklyn is, cheating the system, and it's a broken team and, all this other stuff. But the whole reason why guys hit the buyout market in the first place is they're not the same type of players they were before. I don't see him playing a huge role in playoff minutes, closing lineups. I don't think he's going to be an optimal fit. I think it's just insurance. And, going to Brooklyn, taking the minimum, he has a chance at a ring, a very good one at that. Should be beneficial for him. But, we got to quiet the noise on this whole, it's not fair thing, because this is not the same Aldridge we're accustomed to seeing over the past few years. But
bro, I'm telling you, people are acting like it's 2014. Like, get out of here. Like, chill. Like, it's
time machine. You're going to talk like that.
Yeah, for real. Like, it's like LaMarcus Aldridge has been like not good this season. I mean, so I definitely, like Aaron said, it's going to be an insurance policy. But what I will say, it was reported that, he when they were making the deal, that he was offered, a solid minutes. He's going to be playing, and he's going to be playing plenty of minutes. Any minute that he plays over Nicholas Claxton is pretty criminal. That shouldn't be allowed with that being said, he's probably the worst big on the roster, and that's no hate on LaMarcus Aldridge. That's just
facts.
That's just facts, straight up. So, with that being said, I don't see him playing in the playoffs. I don't think he's going to add much to the rotation in the regular season either. So, I think for him, he just, he's probably starting to realize that, I just need to settle down, win a ring, and probably call it a career soon. But that's kind of where I'm at with that. So,
yeah, that was pretty crazy to see. I mean, the initial rumblings were Miami, right? I mean, Aaron, I'm sure you heard that. Like, he was like one step in the door kind of thing, and then all of a sudden those talks fell apart, and he went to Brooklyn. But yeah, I think this is a triple win again. Like, so Brooklyn gets like another depth piece. Whether or not he plays significant minutes will be up to them. Will be up to their health of the front court. San Antonio gets under the luxury tax, and then LaMarcus Aldridge wins by getting a chance to get a ring. So it made sense. It made sense.
It made plenty of sense. For a guy that, I mean, that's probably the best chance to win a ring that you're gonna, find in NBA. The Brooklyn is just an incredible team, and I'm interested to see how they balance those minutes out. But I'm with you, Ali. Like, seeing Claxton potentially get buried in the rotation, it's not a great look. It's not a great look. Defense is their biggest Achilles heel right now, and Claxton addresses that. So we'll see how they navigate that situation. So for the last one here, guys, we're going to wrap up with this one. Drummond to the Lakers. So Drummond gave back to Cleveland almost $800,000 for the Lakers rotation. He's gonna fill a need, I guess, to a point. I keep reading these articles about his fit there, and the thing they keep saying about him is that he has so much trouble finishing at the rim. He's like near the bottom of the league when it comes to like true shooting percentage for his position and his workload. So he's definitely not going to help them be a more efficient team in the paint. But what I did hear is that he could indirectly help their offense through screen setting, just being a decent role man. And he has good hands, so defensively he's not the worst thing in the world. Definitely better than LaMarcus Aldridge in that regard. But the tricky part for the Lakers is, sure, you get him on a minimum, but he's going to want a decent deal in the summer. He's going to want at least a mid-level, if not higher. So they're restricted because, the Lakers having non-bird rights on him. They're already trying to pay Schroeder, which is going to be upwards of $20 million a year if Schroeder gets what he wants. And, they're already for next season, not that far from the tax, about $14 million. And that's without Schroeder. Yeah. Schroeder, Harrell, and those guys getting new deals. So the Lakers are going to have to walk this tightrope when it comes to money. And I'm not sure how much he's going to help their situation. Maybe he'll be a nice little stopgap. But, the Lakers are still going to be in a tough position. And his first game is going to be, as of this recording tonight, against the Milwaukee Bucks, I've heard. So we'll see how he fits. But, I'm still not entirely excited about how the Lakers are going to look.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I don't understand the fit just because, look, I was pretty low on the Montrezl Harrell signing in the offseason. I didn't understand the fit with that. But he's been playing really well, like really, really well with LeBron and AD out, like 6th man of the year candidate well. So with that being said, is he going to marginalize, or is Montrezl going to be marginalized by Drummond's minutes? Is Marc Gasol going to be excised from the rotation? What's their big rotation going to look like? Because, you brought up the fact that, Andre Drummond isn't a great finisher at the rim. The reason why Dwight and JaVale excelled last year was because they were great finishers above the rim. Andre Drummond is athletic, but he doesn't have that same catch radius or athleticism that he used to have. I don't think he's ever really had a wide catch radius in terms of catching lobs at the rim. He brings a different element, but I'm not sure how that element fits. He's a solid, great passer. I think he's a pretty good passer. But I'm not really sure how that kind of gels in. He's really not going to play much in the playoffs next to AD, considering I think AD played about 65% of his minutes at center last year in the playoffs. So. Yeah. Financially for him, it's a bit of an odd decision. I think for him, it was more emotional in terms of, I want to get to the playoffs. He's never had a playoff win before. He's never won a playoff series. I think he really wants to be on a team like that, especially with LeBron. So I totally get it from that perspective. But I think for me just thinking from an agent perspective, Andre Drummond going into the offseason as an unrestricted free agent, there were other teams available. I wonder if they maybe given Charlotte a call. Charlotte is, they need a center. They need a guy that can, be a role man to all the ball handlers that they have on that team. A team like that, maybe that could get him, a little more money on his contract next year. But it is what it is. It'll be a fascinating fit, and we'll see who gets cut out of the rotation. My guess is probably Marc Gasol.
Maybe.
I think it will be Marc Gasol, which I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of because, you might argue that Marc Gasol is washed or whatever, but he can pass the ball, he can shoot the ball from outside, even though his percentage is not the best, but he's definitely a threat from out there. You don't want to leave him open all the time. Mm-hmm. And if AD is going to play 65 minutes at center, 65% of his minutes at center, and you have Montrezl Harrell playing really well off the bench, I don't know really where Andre Drummond fits. My guess is that AD is going to play less at center, opening up a few more minutes to Andre Drummond because Andre Drummond will be the starter. He'll have a slightly bigger minute load than JaVale McGee did last year. Maybe he'll be between JaVale and Dwight, take up those minutes. And then you have Anthony Davis playing mostly at the 4, hopefully more time at the 5, and then Montrezl Harrell. So it's kind of really stacked in the front court. I think Marc Gasol is going to fall out of the rotation, which I'm not the biggest fan of, as I said. And yeah, it's going to be hard to keep him next year, given all their free agents, Taylor Horton-Tucker. But yeah, let's see. It's been a while since I've watched Andre Drummond play basketball, for real. So let's see how it pans out.
Yeah, I think the one redeeming quality of Drummond offensively is that he's a good distributor as well. I think if you play him in the high post, similar to what you would do with Marc Gasol, and let guys kind of play off of that and cut, I think he could be pretty decent. But yeah, he definitely has some flaws that would be exposed, I think, in certain settings. So,
and he's never played against, or he's never played with someone like LeBron either. He's the best playmaker he's ever played with. So
that's true. That's true. But I think the Lakers cap situation is going to be very interesting to see because, we didn't even touch on Alex Caruso, who's going to be a free agent. So we're looking at 3 or 4 major contributors who are going to be up for new deals, and that's going to push the Lakers into the heights of the tax. So I think eventually, maybe next year or the year after, you're going to see the Lakers start to incur some tax penalties, and I'm sure they're going to be happy to do that as long as LeBron and AD are there. But they might end up in the same territory as the Warriors are in now. So that's going to be painful on the wallets, and we'll see how that affects some of the roster decisions they make going forward. But I think that about does it for us guys here on the NTC podcast. I thank these 2 guys for joining me. I thank you guys for listening. Of course, if you want to check us out on our website, of course, that's going to be notradeclause.com. We have a bunch of resources for you guys to check out. We have cap sheets, we have future draft picks. All those things are being updated, especially after the trade deadline. We wanted to make sure those are all up to date for you guys. So be sure to check out our website if you want to see some of our resources there. And then, of course, if you want to check us out on Twitter or Instagram, our handle is notrade_clause. And we have tweets going out all the time. We tweet out some tidbits. We have some graphics going up. Ali handles that aspect of it. Aram handles our cap sheets. So we're working around the clock to keep this thing updated for you guys. And we're going to have more on the way. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We're going to go in a bi-weekly format from here on out with our podcast. And as the season continues, we're going to be having more conversations and hopefully some special guests joining us here as well. So until next time, guys, take care, and we'll see you back on the podcast real soon.
Have a good one.